Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Channel Surfing. We received a question via email from RKY, who lives in Vancouver, British Columbia. And they ask, I watched your Why We Chose the Ranger Tug 27 video, and it's great. Thank you for that. Saw that you have some experience before this RT27. In your opinion, do you think Ranger Tug is too big of an investment/risk for a new boater? I'm doing some financial planning now, and I was wondering if you have any plans to do a monthly cost video. So I'll answer this question in two parts. Whether something is too big of an investment/risk, I don't know that I could answer that for anybody. Everybody's financial situation is different. I'm always surprised, actually, whenever I see a Ranger Tug up for sale with less than 100 hours on it. Maybe the owner is upgrading to a bigger boat. Maybe they realized they weren't using the boat as they thought they would. Maybe their spouse wasn't nearly as excited about boating as they were. To me, that's a lot of money to invest in and then keep it for such a short time and ultimately sell it at a loss. For us, owning a boat such as channel surfing was a dream that Lizzie and I have always had. We wanted waterfront property, a place to go enjoy life on, exploring, fishing, cruising. It was our home away from home. For a new boat owner, besides the obvious monthly and annual costs of boat ownership, there's also a lot to learn, such as navigation, tides, docking, operation of the boat, as well as what to expect in the way of maintenance and repair costs. Ranger Tugs, specifically, are amongst the most technical boats out there for their size. They have AC and DC power systems, 120 volt and 12 volt systems, 3 battery banks, radar, sonar, chart plotters, a galley with propane, sand tank and toilets, fresh water for 3 sinks and 2 shower heads, shore power, solar power, engine power, trim tabs, a diesel cabin heater. There's a lot of breakers, fuses, and switches. To a new boat owner, this could seem overwhelming. To someone who's owned an RV before, maybe not so much. It's really all subjective. If this would be your first boat, I'd offer this advice. Go as big as you can comfortably afford. You can always add or upgrade things to the boat. The engine and the hull are the 2 items that won't change as long as you own it. In the rest of this video, I'll go over the second part of your question, which is illustrating the costs of boat ownership. What does it cost to own a boat, such as a Ranger Tug RT27? So the first thing is, what does boat stand for? Break out another 1,000. We won't be talking about nickels, dimes, and quarters. We won't even be talking about $10 bills or $50 bills. I round everything up to the nearest $100. It's kind of an inside joke on boaters, but there is actually some truth to that. So common costs of owning a boat. You have the boat loan, state registration, U.S. Coast Guard registration if you choose to go documented like channel surfing did. Boat insurance, moorage and storage, routine maintenance, cleaning costs, fuel, operational expenses, things that break, upgrades, and then more fishing gear. So first we'll go over Ranger Tug R27 to understand the specifics of that, because costs are going to vary greatly between boats of different shapes and sizes. So channel surfing being a 27-foot Ranger Tug outboard, it's a gasoline-powered boat. It's actually 32 foot overall. That's really important to understand. The manufacturer says it's 27 foot, which is great, but everybody that I converse with, as far as if I want guest moorage, they say, how long's the boat? 27 foot is not how long the boat is. 32 foot is how long the boat is. If I tell them that I need a 27 foot spot to moor the boat, and I show up at 32 foot, I'm going to have 5 feet of the boat sticking out, or they won't have they won't have room for that last 5 feet, and they'll turn me away. Right. So whenever it goes to talking about moorage of the boat or guest moorage of the boat, it's always the 32 foot number. Technically, it's like 31 foot 7 inches with the engine down. With the engine up, the boat's almost 34 foot long. It's 8.5 foot wide on the beam. That's as wide as it can be to be trailered without needing an oversized permit. It's got a 300 horsepower Yamaha outboard. It's got a 9.9 Yamaha kicker. The boat weighs about 7,000 pounds. I would guesstimate the boat fully loaded on a trailer to be like 8,000, 8,500 pounds for towing. She pulls 33 inches of draft with the engine down, holds 150 gallons of gasoline, 40 gallons of fresh water, and a 30-gallon sand tank. So common costs. The boat loan, it's a $200,000 boat on average. So you figure probably, depending on terms of your loan and down payments and such, figure $1,000 a month roughly for a boat loan. State registration runs about $1,100 a year. Coast Guard registration, since we got the boat documented, it was about $700 to get it documented, and then it's $25 a year thereafter for the Coast Guard registration. And I've got a summary slide at the very end that kind of highlights this with the numbers. Boat insurance runs about $1,000 a year. We'll talk more about the boundaries of insurance here in a few minutes. Moorage and storage of the boat, routine maintenance, cleaning costs of the boat. Cleaning is ongoing. Fuel is actually things that oftentimes we look at first, because when you have a vehicle that gets less than 2 miles to the gallon compared to cars that we're used to seeing 20 plus miles per gallon on, you think, my God, fuel's gonna be really expensive. Fuel's actually not even close to a significant expense of the boat. The boat loan, the registration, the insurance, the moorage, the maintenance, that's going to consume a lot more money than what fuel actually does. Operational expenses, this is things like boat ramps, and guest moorage as you're out using the boat that you'll pay. Things that break, boats run in very harsh environments. They say the only thing that's not affected by seawater is seawater specifically. So you just expect corrosion, you expect things to wear out, boats vibrate a lot, things shake loose, shake apart, everything gets wet. Salt water gets into the air, gets into everything. So you always want to plan for things that are going to break. And then upgrades to make the boat specific to you. You can have the exact same boat with two different owners, and they could be configured extremely differently based on how the owners use the boat. And more fishing gear. So insurance boundaries. So the default insurance clause is basically would limit us to inside of Vancouver Island and Puget Sound, right? And basically everything inside of the red is shown here. Ranger Tug on our insurance policy, because it's a Ranger Tug and they're so seaworthy, they actually override the default language on the insurance policy and basically say, as long as I stay within 75 miles of shore on intercoastal passageways, then I'm covered. So that actually expands out our range to this. This is what's going to let us go all the way up to Skagway, Alaska. I wouldn't go further north than Skagway because I'd have to go outside into the open ocean to head over towards Anchorage. And I wouldn't take my RT-27 that far out in that open ocean. Plus, I also have to remember it's only got a 150-gallon gas tank, so its range is probably safely about 200 miles between gas stations. You got to look at that too. Now we'll talk trailering. So this was our first truck and trailer that we towed. We drug this boat everywhere. The trailering is nice because you can get to lakes, you can get to rivers, you can get to saltwater. It's more versatile. It's more efficient to travel it because then you're getting 10 miles per gallon towing rather than 1.5 miles per gallon driving. Disadvantage of trailering is you've got you got to buy the trailer. You have the cost of maintenance of the trailer. There's tires, there's brakes, there's hydraulics that all need maintenance periodically on them. This is channel surfing on a trailer. We actually, this picture was taken last week. We don't own a trailer. I had to borrow a trailer from a friend. We'll talk about this a little bit more when we get into the things that break section. Let's see. So cost of the trailer on a Ranger Tug 27, I want to say it's around 12 grand-ish for the trailer. Then once you have the trailer, you got to store the trailer. Either in the front of your house if you have space, or you have to pay for storage elsewhere, a storage facility. Annual tabs and registration, pay that to the state. I remember on our last trailer that was about $50 a year. Launch fees, Port of Everett I know charges $15 to launch the boat, and then there's an overnight parking fee for each additional day that you spend there with a max limit of how many days you can be parked overnight. The towing vehicle expenses, you need a vehicle big enough to tow 8,500 pounds roughly. You're probably not going to get more than 10 miles per gallon while you're towing. The trailer itself is going to need tires, brakes, hydraulics, wheel bearings. This stuff isn't done every year, but I'd say probably every 2 to 3 years you'll be doing maintenance on the trailer. And then winterizing costs of the boat. If the boat's on the trailer, the entire boat can freeze from the keel all the way up. So you have to account for that too. So looking at Moorage, this is how we chose to moor channel surfing. She's got a covered slip. We like the covered slip because it keeps the rain off the boat. That helps keep it cleaner. It also keeps the sun off the boat, so that helps against UV rays deteriorating the paint, causing the paint to fade, the upholstery to fade, the canvas to fade. So it's just a trade-off. Pay more for the covered spots, so I spend a little bit less time cleaning from that, as well as wear and tear on the boat. The other thing that's nice is the boat's in the water, and out here in the Puget Sound, the water usually runs about 44 degrees year-round. It'll fluctuate a couple degrees up or down, but when it's 20 degrees outside, that water's still in the low 40 degrees. So anything within about 5 or 6 inches above that water line and below won't freeze. So I got shore power. I can plug in a couple of heaters, one for the cabin, one for the bilge, and the boat's effectively winterized, as opposed to having to run antifreeze through all the systems. It also lets you use the boat year-round. Good thing on a Moorage too is there's no boat ramp fees, there's no boat launch fees, there's no lines to wait in for any of that. There's no worry about if there's parking available when you go to launch your boat. You don't have to worry about the tides of the boat ramps, which is nice. You just grab the keys, walk down to the dock, and depart. Another way to moor the boat is dry dock storage. So this is actually taken over at Dagmar's. We've got another video that talks about how it actually illustrates how Dagmar's comes in with a forklift, and they just pick the boat up right out of the water, and they come over, set it on the blocks for us. Being the boat's out of the water, now I don't have to worry about growth, on the bottom of the boat because it's not in the water, but I don't have a cover anymore, so the sun's beating down on it, the rain's is beating down on it. If it's winter time, I have to fully winterize the entire boat, antifreeze through the system so that stuff doesn't freeze. But if I want to do maintenance to the engine, being out of the water, that makes it convenient to do that. There's just pros and cons of different ways to moor the boat. Port of Everett charges about $450 for a covered slip for 32 foot. Dagmar's is half that cost. It's $250 for their outdoor moorage. So let's see, we talked about covered and uncovered. We talked about on the block. Electric. So at Dagmar's, there's like a 15 amp circuit I plug into that's shared with a bunch of other boats, so it's really easy to trip a breaker. So you're limited with what electric you can actually use. At Port of Everett, I get a dedicated 30 amp shore power connection. I can use all of that, but it's also metered, and I pay for the electric, so I get a more expensive electric bill in the winter than I do in the summertime. What I use electric for keeps the hot water tank full of hot water, so when we take the boat out, we already start with hot water. The hot water tank is AC powered, so once we're underway, if the inverter's turned off, then that hot water is not getting hotter. It's just sitting in there. The battery charger, the heater, I specify electric heater is what I would have for winter time to keep the boat from freezing, and a dehumidifier to keep the mold away. When you're doing moorage, then you also have to do haul outs at least once a year. You've got bottom paint to worry about. You want to clean the bottom of the boat. You might have to replace the anodes, and obviously if you have any engine maintenance to do. So the thing with haul outs, like Port of Everett, you got to call and schedule it. Usually it's a couple weeks out to get it scheduled, so they charge roughly $250 for a haul out, and then you've got about $60 a day that they charge you while you're out. So you want to get the boat hauled out, do the work, and get the boat back in the water as quick as you can. They'll oftentimes, for quicker jobs, they'll let you do it over lunch, where they do a half trip. They pull the boat out of the water on the travel lift. They leave it hanging. The crew goes to lunch, and then you clean the bottom of the boat, change the lube oil out in the lower gear unit, maybe change your anodes. You've got an hour's worth of work to do, and then they come back from lunch and they put the boat back in the water, and then they don't have to put it on blocks or store it. Right, and then obviously the winterizing costs I think are much less if you're moored in the water anyway. If you're If you're obviously moored at Dagmars or any other kind of dry dock storage, then you're still going to have to winterize. Talk about routine maintenance. Being that channel surfing's got an outboard engine, right? It takes maintenance every 100 hours. We'll go over what all that's involved in. The Maxim boat we had also, it was a gasoline engine. It was the same schedule, same things that had to be changed every 100 hours. Boat does have to be out of the water to do the routine maintenance. Transom anodes. This is the transom anode underneath the engine that has to get replaced periodically. These are the trim tab anodes, as well as the bottom needs to be cleaned. So routine maintenance. Every 50 hours, you should replace the secondary fuel filter, which is just a canister filter. It screws on, screws off, really easy to do. And inspect and replace the anodes if necessary. Every 100 hours, you change the oil in the oil filter, just like you would your car. There's a primary fuel filter in the engine to change out. Change lower gear oil. Let's see. Grease all the Zerk fittings for the engine, for the steering. Inspect and replace the spark plugs. Inspect and replace the water impeller. Inspect the propeller shaft. Sometimes you get fishing line or something wrapped up around that. So you take the prop off and make sure there's nothing wrapped around the shaft. And inspect and replace your anodes. All of this is fairly simple work to do. It's routine maintenance. Nothing too complicated. Every 200 hours, you'll do all the 100 hour maintenance, and you'll replace the thermostats. And about every 300 to 500 hours, the manual says that you should replace the engine head anodes. There's actually, because the engine's raw water cooled, it actually has anodes inside the engine. There's one for each cylinder, so there's 6 of them total to be replaced. And then the boat batteries, just to check the boat batteries' health, and if they need to be replaced, replace them. Average usage on a boat, they say, is 100 hours in the Pacific Northwest, just to put it in comparison. So let's talk about things that break. Boats will have things that break. The marine environment is a very hostile environment. As I said, there's a lot of vibration that shakes everything loose. There's salt water gets in the air and just gets into everything and causes corrosion on everything. Key things to understand, like electrical. If you have copper wiring, exposed copper wire should be tinned. The tin keeps the salt water from corroding the copper, which will tarnish and degrade. You've got you want stranded wire, not solid core. Solid core under vibration will break, where stranded won't. Just things like that. So it's just inevitable you're going to have stuff that's going to break on the boat. So channel surfing, in this photograph, we had to tow her up to a Yamaha dealer because we've got an issue with the power tilt trim unit where the trim won't go down. So I had to borrow a trailer from a friend. I'm very thankful for Mike was willing to let me borrow his trailer to get it up to the Yamaha dealer. So this is as far down as our trim would go. This just happened a couple weeks ago. It should go all the way down. It should have no blue dashes, right? So on the power tilt trim unit, just to illustrate things that can break. So the center cylinder with the green arrow, that's the tilt that brings the engine all the way out of the water. And then the two shorter hydraulic rods are for the trim that actually adjust the engine at the bottom end for its alignment within the water. The trim's very important if you're going to be going 25 knots. So being the fact that they only go down about a half inch to 3/4 inch right now, something's wrong. And the boat's obviously under warranty. It's 6 months old, so I took it up to the Yamaha dealer to say, hopefully this is a warranty fix. I'm waiting to hear back. Let's talk about the costs of fuel. So fuel actually sounds expensive, and I guess it kind of is, but in the big scheme of things, it's not some of the most expensive things you pay for on the boat. For planning trips and avionics, I usually use two numbers: 6.8 knots at 2.5 gallons per hour, or 25 knots at 16 gallons per hour. This gives me lets me use navionics to plan my trips and understand what the cost of fuel is going to be for them. I chose 6.8 knots. Technically, I can do upwards of 10 knots in the boat. that's still reasonable. But at 10 knots, my fuel efficiency is almost the same as what I could get at 25. So, doing it at 6.8 knots, I'm actually extending the range of the boat. By doing that, that's a good trade-off. Is why I chose that number. Anything above 10 knots and less than 22 knots is pretty much just how to burn gas fast and get nothing for it. That's faster than the hull speed of the boat that it was designed for, and it's slower than the planing speed, so that's why it's so inefficient in that range. But anything less than 10 knots and anything faster than 22 is great. So generally speaking, we cruise at 25 knots. That's where the boat spends most of its time. Wide open throttle is 35 knots if you want to get somewhere quick. I usually only do that if I'm trying to outrun some weather. And just in general, to blend the slow boating with the cruising, like what's the average ownership of the boat? So the first 150 hours we put on our engine, we traveled a little over 1,500 nautical miles. We burned 968 gallons of fuel, and that's an average of 1.57 nautical miles per gallon, which if you convert it, that's about 1.8 miles per gallon. Everything I do is in knots because the wind speed's always reported in knots, so then you do the boat knots, and then you do nautical miles just to keep all the units the same. And then here's some screenshots showing the actual boat with the RPMs and the gallons per hour, what you can expect: 6.8 knots, 2.5 gallons per hour. 8.3 knots, you get 4.7 gallons per hour. You're down to 2 nautical miles per gallon. Here's cruising, 26 knots, 4,500 RPM, 16 gallons per hour. Talk briefly about fuel, especially if you're a new boat owner. Ethanol is at all the gas stations on land. It's hard to find fuel on land that does not have 10% ethanol. Ethanol is a corn byproduct. It's actually it's a way that they use to boost octane and stuff on gas. So ethanol absorbs water, and boats are surrounded by water, and water doesn't burn, so you don't want water in your gas tank. Also, as gas with ethanol sits in your tank over extended periods of time, which sometimes boats will sit unused for a month or two, then that it will often separate out of the gas on top of that. So you have to pay a lot more attention to putting in fuel treatments if you were to run ethanol. The other thing is the Yamaha 300 and actually the 250 Yamaha, which is on the R25, they both want 89 octane per Yamaha's recommendation. There's NOx sensors in the engine, so if you run 87, you're not going to hurt it. It'll just downgrade the performance automatically of the engine to adjust. We actually don't notice any difference between whether we're running 87 or 89. I can only get 89 octane at two different marinas out in Puget Sound that I've found, Des Moines and Oak Harbor. So most of the time, we're filling up with 87 octane. But on the dock, at the fuel docks, it's usually non-ethanol. All right. I work really hard to not put ethanol into my gas tank. The 9.9 kicker is carburetor, and ethanol will gum up a carburetor as well and cause you extra maintenance there. So that as far away I can stay from ethanol, the better. Another thing to note too of interest is that 87 octane gas with 10% ethanol is actually 85 octane gas. The ethanol boosts the octane to get you to the 87. So if I had a choice between 89 octane with ethanol versus 87 octane without ethanol, I will choose the without ethanol option. Fuel is also more expensive at a fuel dock than on land, just in general. Which makes it, so if you're trailering, it makes it more attractive to fill up on land, but then you're putting ethanol in there. That's your trade-off. Also note that when you're out and about, you've got to go where the fuel stations are. Fuel docks are not open 24/7 like they are on land. Sometimes they're not open 7 days a week, so you always have to check and see if you need fuel at a specific dock. The most I remember paying for gas was up on Orcas Island in a marina. It was $4.80 a gallon. Luckily, I only needed 60 gallons at that time. But if you need it, then the gas is there, and you're going to pay what it costs. But in general, I would say this last summer was probably paying $3.60 a gallon on average, I would guesstimate. Don't pay the gas tax. If you're Washington State, I file a claim for all my fuel purchases with the state of Washington, and I get a refund of the gas tax. Basically, All gas that's sold in Washington State has the gas tax applied to it. The gas tax is mandated by law to be used for roads and road maintenance, and boats don't use roads, so they're exempt from that. But you're forced to pay the tax up front. Then it's like filling out an expense report to get your refund back. On average, it's about $37 on every 100 gallons of gas purchased, which may not sound like much, but that's a night's moorage at someplace nice at Friday Harbor or Lopez Island or something. June, July, August last year, I got $230 back from the state just over the gas tax. That was pretty cool. About operational expenses. So obviously, guest moorage, they're going to charge based on the length of the boat, and that's the actual length of the boat, not what the manufacturer says the boat is. Our maximum was a 22-foot bow rider. It was 24-foot overall. There was a 2-foot swim step, so guest moorage fees we were paying was $24 or 24-foot for it. On channel surfing, obviously we always use 32 foot as the number. There's enough Ranger tugs in the Pacific Northwest that all the marinas know how long a Ranger Tug 23 is, and a 25 and a 27. The resorts and in state parks also have dock space available on a first come first served basis. They also have mooring balls. It's usually a fixed fee on the mooring balls, about $15, so you can buy the state pass. The state annual pass for that. They do require that if you use a state marine park mooring ball, that you have to make it to shore, and there's a box with some registration paperwork you fill out and put your and pay your night's fee on that. And you're supposed to do that within 15 to 20 minutes of tying up to the mooring ball. So you need to make sure you have a dinghy to be able to get to shore to do that. On guest moorage fees, some marinas will charge extra for shore power electrical. Some might not have shore power electrical. They may have moorage for you, but no electrical. Or if they do, they may want extra money. Generally, we see $5 extra for shore power electrical for the day, if they charge it all for it. So a lot of marinas don't; they just include it with the guest moorage as well. Trailer launch fees and overnight parking. We talked about that. Most launches have a fee of sorts to pay for, and some are more primitive than others also as far as launching. If you're looking at trailering a boat, trailering is very different than moorage in that you have to have a place to launch the boat. Port of Everett has a 13-lane boat launch, which is one of the largest on the West Coast, and they have a super large parking lot. But you get there during opening day of shrimp season, and they'll use all 13 lanes for outgoing traffic. It's organized chaos, and they will fill that parking lot up completely, right? And then again, you get other boat ramps like Oak Harbor. Their boat ramp is it's not very steep, so you end up sinking half your vehicle into the water to get the boat to float. That's because that boat ramp was designed for seaplanes years ago, and now they use it for boat ramps. You may have boat ramps like Coopville or Utsalati that you have to watch the tide, that if you don't have 4 foot or higher of water, you can't use those. Utsalati doesn't even have a dock. You're basically just pushing your boat into the ocean, for an example. That's very primitive. So you pay attention to that. Sand pump out fees. Most of the time the sand pump outs are no charge, but sometimes there may be a $5 or $10 charge associated with those. Anchoring, however, is free. You can anchor outside a marina. You can anchor inside a state park. You can anchor any place that it's safe, and there's no charge for anchoring. And then always leave money left over for upgrades. You're always going to want to do something different to the boat. Accessorize this, accessorize that, add something to it, change something else. So on channel surfing, we've got some more upgrades coming. We've got a Vesper 8000 EIS we're going to get installed. We're going to add a third Firefly battery to our house bank. We're going to do some custom shelving for that center cockpit lazarette to make that storage area much more useful for dry stores. And we're going to be upgrading our solar panel. Incidentally, the agenda we have behind all of our upgrades is we're looking to do a bunch of off-the-grid cruising. We want to go all the way up to Glacier Bay and Skagway and Juneau, Alaska. So it's a pretty good distance between marinas, and we don't want to have to count on electrical at all for that trip. We basically want to just hit fuel and keep going. And don't forget, more fishing gear. So summary of the costs, just to go over this in high level. So state registration, $1,100 a year. Coast Guard documentation runs us $25 a year. Boat insurance is about $1,000 a year. Routine maintenance, estimate about $1,500 a year. That would include one haul out to get all that done. And this is assuming somebody else is doing the work. If you do the work yourself, you can cut a lot of these costs. Monthly cost, the boat loan at about $1,000 a month. This is going to be subject to everybody's unique situation with, here and again, down payment, interest, and boat and accessories on the boat. It's going to change that number greatly. Moorage, $450 a month is what we pay for a covered spot at Everett. An uncovered spot would be in the low 300s, 325, $350. Dagmar's is $250 for their dry dock storage for our boat. Periodic costs, bottom paint, about $3,000 every 2 to 3 years. That'll have to get redone. If we had a trailer, I would plan on about $1,000 every 3 years. The old trailer we had, that's pretty close to what I'd had to spend. Tandem axle trailer, there's 4 tires, there's 4 sets of brakes. The brakes will eventually get corroded from seawater and have to get replaced. The hydraulics has to be topped off and hydraulic fluid changed periodically. You've got your operational expenses. So looking at 100 hours a year, which is average usage, I would estimate fuel to run about $2,300 a year. Guest moorage, probably about $1,200. Here again, this is subject to your usage, where you go, how fast you go, what you use the boat for. And then things that break, I'd plan on $2,000 a year just to have it. And if you don't use it that year, great. Other than that, thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send us an email or leave them in the comment section below.
Again, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell for notifications so you get notified whenever we post a new video. And thank you so much, and you have a great day, and stay tuned for more channel surfing.